helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elam Counselling Services.
Hi, I'm Michael Hart, Director of Elam Counselling Service. We are a Christian counseling ministry in Ottawa, and I want to thank you for listening to this edition of Life Transformation. Yes, we are a Christian counseling radio show where chains are literally broken and the lives are literally transformed. If you're not familiar with Elam Counseling, you can find out more about us at elamcounselingministry.com. That's ELIM as in man, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. And in a nutshell, we are a professional counseling ministry that provides psychotherapy from a biblical perspective. The rates that we offer are very competitive and at times below the standard market rates, and we're able to do that as a result of donations to our ministry. So if you're out there today and you're listening to this show and you have been blessed, I'd like you to consider making a donation to this ministry so that we can be of help to others. If you are in help, then please don't hesitate to get in touch with us at 613-699-1677. Again, the number is 613-699-1677. And today with me in studio is Melissa. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, Michael. It's good to be back.
Well, we have another interesting show for our listeners today. Today we are talking about broken dreams.
Mm-hmm. And to kind of introduce our show and the topic of broken dreams, you've chosen the story of Ruth and Naomi as the basis of our discussion about broken dreams that we'll have throughout the show. Why is this a good story to talk about broken dreams?
Well, if you listen to the narrative of the story as found in Ruth chapter 1, and maybe I'll just read the first 4 verses, or maybe the first 5 verses, it will give us a good picture of why this story is about broken dreams, and then maybe I'll elaborate on that a little. So, Ruth chapter 1 reads, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So we see here from this narrative, the first 5 verses of Ruth chapter 1, that we have a family who had left Bethlehem, Judah, to go to Moab in search of a better life. There was famine in the land in Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab. And as the story unfolds, we are told that Naomi is met with tragedy after tragedy. Her husband died, and then her 2 sons died one after the other in the space of about 10 years. And so we have this sad picture of this woman in this strange land, without her husband, without her sons, and in those days she would be left basically to provide for herself. And in those days, without a male in the family, it would be very, very dire financial consequences without a provider. So as the story unfolds in the later chapters, we are told that she had to pack up from that land that she had went to the land of dreams to move back to Bethlehem, Judah, to go back to the place that she had left in search of a better life. So this is what we call broken dreams. And what is really very, very poignant about this story and very, very forceful is the way the characters in this story is named. If we look at the Hebrew names, the tragedy becomes even more clearer to us, because we are told that this family, from their names, they were a very happy family to begin with in Bethlehem, Judah, before the famine struck. So, for example, the name of Elimelech, the husband, means God is my king. Naomi means pleasant. And Mahlon, one of the sons, means song, and Chilion, the second son, means satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. So everything was going right.
Everything was going well. So here we have a family where God is their king, where they are pleasant, and where there are songs in the household, and there is a sense of satisfaction. And to make it even more tragic, the place where they're leaving from is Bethlehem, which means house of bread. So we have a story here where the house of bread became a place of famine. Mm-hmm. And we have them moving away from Bethlehem, Judah, to go to this foreign land, Moab, to find a better life. And as they're there in this strange country, they are met with tragedy. They are met with the death of the husband, followed by the death of the two sons. So it's quite a sad story, and I think that's the reason I've used this story as to talk about broken dreams.
Mm-hmm. So we see this example of broken dreams from the Bible. What examples from your clinical practice do you see as they relate to broken dreams?
Well, I see a number of different examples of broken dreams. To draw a parallel to this story, I see immigrants who have left their land. They were in fairly good jobs, fairly good positions in their former country. Some of them were doctors, lawyers, and they have left their country and they have come here to Canada, the land of opportunity, only to realize that their skill and their expertise that they have brought with them is not recognized. And so many of these people have to now take on menial job working at minimum wage, and the family, as a result of the long hours that the parents have to work, sometimes the kids, they fall into bad company, and the whole family structure is broken down, and there are a lot of mental health issues that stems from the stress that the family is placed under. In other situation involving Canadians, broken dreams sometimes is in the form of a divorce, where in Christian circles we have Christians who fell in love in the youth group and who had this dream of a life together serving God and doing missionary work, who are now faced with the reality of a divorce, and where they are now going their different ways, and the family, the children are now visiting parents in different locations. So that's an example of broken dreams as well. And there are many other examples, such as untimely death. Sometimes a child is in the prime of his or her career is suddenly taken away from a family, and that's a form of broken dream. So if you're listening to this show today and you have a broken dream in your life, and you are saying, yes, I can identify, I am that immigrant, or you're saying, yes, I'm that person who have gone through divorce, or maybe it wasn't a divorce, maybe it's a relationship that you think would lead to marriage, and now you're left alone with sadness and broken heart. I want you to stay tuned for this show, because we have a number of things that we are going to be covering today that can be helpful to you. You're listening to the Life Transformation Radio broadcast. I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elam Counselling Services, and my number is 613-699-1677. Yes, 613-699-1677. Our website, in case you need to find out more about us, is elamcounselingministry.com. So if you're listening and you feel that you can identify with the story of Naomi, then please get in touch with us. We'll be happy to help.
So, Michael, when you were giving the examples of broken dreams that you've seen in your practice, you alluded to the fact that sometimes when broken dreams are experienced by people, mental health issues can develop as a result of. What kind of mental health issues are you talking about?
We see issues such as depression, where a person Another form of broken dream, someone gets a very good job and they begin to plan for their dream home, and then suddenly they're laid off, and that's a form of broken dream as well. And from those situations sometimes develop depression, where a person begins to stress so much over the situation that they are now unable to sleep, they are not eating properly, and it spirals downward. The lack of sleep leads to further sadness and further inability to deal with the stress. So we have depression, we have people who have become suicidal as a result as well. There are some people who just cannot cope with the stresses or the curveballs that life has thrown their way, and so they just want to get off this ship of life, and so they want to take their lives. So we see that kind of situation as well. We also see people who the pain has become so unbearable for them, so that they begin to self-harm. They begin to have the urge to cut, because the pain from cutting themselves or from burning themselves is less than what they're feeling from the pain. It's a distraction from the pain of the broken dream. So you can just imagine, if we were to talk about Naomi's situation for a moment, and we have Naomi, she's in this land. Her husband has died, her two sons have died, and now she's faced with economic hardship, and she's now faced with the prospect of going back home without any means of looking after herself. You can see the frustration that would bring to that person. And so from these challenges, sometimes mental health problems develop. What is interesting, as the story unfolds, we're told that when Naomi goes back to her land, Naomi, the name that means pleasant, goes back to her country, and they saw her and they said, "Oh, Naomi's back." She said, "Don't call me Naomi. My name is now Mara," which means bitter.
So you see how much it's changed her.
It has changed her to the point where she's saying, "I am not worthy of the name Naomi. I am not worthy to be called pleasant anymore. My name is now Mara." So this was a bitter, broken woman because of the losses that she has suffered. So sometimes people become bitter. In other places, she talks about how God has dealt, other places in the book of Ruth, she talks about how God has dealt bitterly and heavily with her. So there was a spiritual crisis, I think, that we can see from the narrative, where she was beginning to question God. How could a loving God do this to my family and allow me to go through this crisis that I am now in?
It seems like, as you describe these different situations, there's a phase when you're in it where there's a lot of uncertainty going on, and that can be really difficult, because what you were so sure of at one point is now completely changed.
Absolutely.
And you're having to face this.
Absolutely.
So in the story of Naomi and Ruth, there's some principles that you've highlighted as principles which are important to recover from broken dreams. What are these principles, and how can people apply them to their lives?
Well, if we look at the story, and the book of Ruth is a very short book. It's just 4 chapters. And as we read those 4 chapters, there are some principles that begin to jump out at us. The first thing that we see, the first point that I would like to drive home today, that I think is very important if you're faced with a broken dream, that we get from the story of Ruth, from the book of Ruth and about Naomi, is that Naomi, number one, she was very much emotional aware. There was an emotional awareness. She was in touch with her emotions, and she talks about being bitter, for example. And this gives me the picture of a woman who was in pain, but she wasn't spiritualizing her issue. She wasn't pretending to be some kind of a spiritual superstar, where sometimes as Christians in our culture we pretend to do that.
Everything's fine.
Yes.
Nothing's the problem. Everything's great.
Everything is fine, and I am in control, and God has just taken my husband and my 2 sons, but I'm trusting him so much, and I don't have any worry or any doubt that God is gone. But we see from the life of Naomi that she was emotionally aware. She talked about how she felt. The next principle that we saw is that there was a spiritual honesty, and I think I alluded to that in the first point as well, in that she made it very clear how she felt about God. She said, God has dealt very grievously with me. God has dealt, in other words, unfavorable with her. So she's not trying to give some kind of spiritual, somewhat I call Christianese in our culture, where she's talking about how God has a will, or she's sure that God is going to work out a way. Mm-hmm. No, she's saying these things are very grievous that have entered into my life, and God has actually done these things. So sometimes I meet people who are going through broken dreams where they're angry at God. I've clients who have had multiple losses in a short space of time, where they'll say, well, I can't understand why God would do this. If he's a loving God, if he's a compassionate God, then, and he's all powerful, then why didn't he intervene? And so for some of us, if we hear that kind of talk, we become very, very troubled by it, and we say, well, this person is blaspheming, they're not trusting God, they should have faith. But I think sometimes that kind of pretense that we go through when we are faced with broken dreams, where we can't be honest with our fellow believers and say, you know what, I can't see God in this. Mm-hmm. You know what, I don't understand it, and it's painful. I think that stands in the way. That stands in the way of healing. So she was, number one, she was emotionally aware of her situation. Number two, there was a spiritual honesty. And let me just say this here, that the spiritual honesty that she had was made very clear to her daughter-in-laws. So when you talk about how she talked about her suffering, she was talking about how she felt to Orpah and to Ruth. And sometimes as Christians, we feel if we're in a situation where we're the believer and there are unsaved around us, our unsaved relatives, we can't be genuine with our emotions because we have to be strong, And
show that example that I trust in the Lord always, and we get through everything, and the smiles on our face as we're going through the darkness of life.
Yes, and look at me as I walk through tragedy, how I'm going to walk through with this sort of stiff upper lip, and God can give me all the punches he wants, but I'm just going to keep going, and nothing is going to faze me. I can't show vulnerability. I can't question God, because how dare my unsaved relatives hear about that. But what is interesting from this story, and I think I want to drive home this point today, is that in Naomi's bitterness, in her questioning of God, when it came time for her to go back to her land, and she called her daughter-in-laws to her side, and she said, it's time to say goodbye. I have nothing more to offer you. I'm going back home, and please don't come with me, because I have nothing to offer you. I have no sons you can marry. There's no future for you there. Ruth came to faith as a result of Naomi's openness, as a result of her spiritual honesty, because there was something about how Naomi dealt with her broken dreams that Ruth says, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. I get goosebumps as I'm talking about that.
Me as well, as you're saying that. And it's one of those things, I think it shows a realness to people, that just because we're Christians doesn't mean our life is perfect. But we do have someone watching out for us.
Absolutely.
And when we're having those feelings, we can express them.
Yes.
With the underlying knowledge that our faith will get us through, but we're not superhuman. Our God is superhuman.
Yes, and we're not in some kind of a bubble where, because we are Christians, we are just going to have wealth and health
if only.
And prosperity of, all the days of our life, and nothing evil is going to happen. People in the world out there, they can't identify with that. So they are not going to be attracted, to our God, because they're going to say, well, my life is not like your life. If your your life is this life where all your kids are perfect, your husband is awesome, your job is great, and you never have, a toothache or anything ever go bad in you because you're serving your God. No, I can't deal with that. But we see in Ruth that in Naomi that she had this emotional awareness, she had this spiritual honesty, and she had this emotional openness as well, where she talked openly to her daughter-in-laws. And I think if you're going through hard times, you don't have to pretend. You don't have to show to your neighbors that somehow you are joyful in the midst of what you're going through. You can show them that you can be sad, you can be human going through that, but you have a God who is walking with you through that. So there was something about Naomi that even in her bitterness, even in the tragedies that she suffered, Ruth said, I want your God. I want that God that you have. Your God is better than anything we have here in Moab. And I am going back to Jerusalem with you because I am attracted to your God. So the pretense doesn't do that. What did it was the genuineness. So far, to the question you've asked me, what are some of the highlights from the story of Ruth that people can should embrace as they're going through brokenness? I've said, number one, they need to be emotional awareness. Be aware of what you're going through. Identify the emotions. Days when you're up and you realize you don't feel good, ask yourself, what am I feeling today? Identify the emotions. And number two, be spiritually honest. Don't pretend. Be aware of how you feel towards God, because God already knows. You can put on a big show for the people in the church and a big smile, but God knows how you feel. Number three, be open. Talk about how you feel with those around you. Sometimes parents who are going through hard times feel that they can't let the kids see them cry because it will somehow affect the kid adversely. I think what affect kids adversely is when they don't see you cry. Because your tears can sometimes give the kids permission to say, if mom cries, if dad cries, I can cry too, and it's okay. And sometimes kids needs to get in touch. So we need emotional awareness. But then the final thing that I see in this story, and I think it's very important for people who are going through broken dream, is that Naomi did not adopt a hopeless stance where she just said, I'm going to just sit here and die in my suffering. No, there was something about her relationship with God where she said, you know what, I'm going to do something about my situation. Life might be hard right now. My husband may have died, my sons may have died, but I am not going to lay down here in Moab and die. I am going to go in search of a better life. And it was that kind of attitude that got her going back towards Jerusalem, the house of bread, as it's called, it means in the Hebrew. As she goes back to that place, that we find that the story has a happy ending, where Ruth goes there and Ruth married Boaz, and they now have a better life back in their homeland.
So I think you've just started to allude to my next question there, that in spite of the fact that this is a story that starts off with a broken dream, everything that was supposed to happen has been turned to dust, and these two women are faced with probably the worst time of their life, that this story actually can inspire hope for others who are going through situations where their own personal dreams have been broken. Can you explain a little bit about how this story actually is a hopeful one?
Absolutely. And from what I have read, the listeners might be saying there is no hope in this story. But if you read the rest of the story, you'll see why it's a story of hope. Before I do that, I'd just like to give out our contact information again. You're listening to the Life Transformation Radio broadcast. I am your host, Michael Hart. With me in studio today is Melissa Wagot, and we're discussing broken dreams, and we're looking at broken dreams through the story of Ruth. And we have talked about a number of things that you can listen to if you have missed by going to our website or the CHRI website. Our website is elamcounselingministry.com, and you can listen to the show there. It will be posted there after this broadcast. And so if you're going through broken dreams and you want to know how to deal with it, I've covered 5 important points so far, and you can go over these points by going to our website. If you need to call me to talk with me about a situation, my number is 613-699-1677, and my name again is Michael Hart. So you have asked me, how is this story a story of hope? Because there is so much sadness and death and famine and poverty in this story and hopelessness. But then as we get to the end of the story, we're told that Naomi packs up, she leaves Moab, she goes back to Jerusalem, and her daughter-in-law Ruth finds a husband there. And what is interesting, as we come to the end of the story, we are given a kind of genealogy of the descendants that comes from Ruth's offspring. So we are told that as the story goes, the child that Ruth ends up having is David is from that line, King David. And from the line of King David, we have Jesus Christ. So here we have, out of this suffering, out of these 2 deaths, out of tragedy in Moab of all places, we have this great story of redemption, where God is able to take all of that suffering, all of that pain, brings happiness in the end. But not only that, we have the great redemption of mankind through Jesus Christ, who was a descendant of offspring of Ruth the Moabite.
You can't get more hopeful than that.
Can't get more hopeful than that. So out of tragedy, God has this tremendous potential to bring about joy. So I know I'm speaking to someone today. You might be going through a situation where your situation seems very bleak, very hopeless. And I'm not asking you to pretend that everything is going to be okay, or to have hope at this point in time, or to begin to say that there's going to be a happy ending. But I'm just saying that the story that we see happening over and over again is that God is able to bring joy out of tragedy, and he's able to bring beauty out of ashes and joy out of mourning. So as you're going through your situation, I'm just encouraging you to listen to this broadcast again and begin to put those principles that we talk about from Naomi's life in action, because as you do so, there is a possibility of breakthrough. And the final point that I covered in the five points that I covered earlier on is that Naomi didn't lie down and say, I'm going to make Moab my grave. She said, my husband may have died here, my 2 sons may have died here, but I'm not going to lie down and die. I'm going to make something of my life. And so she moved back to Jerusalem, to the house of bread. And we have a great story of redemption that has happened as a result of that. So you've been listening to the Life Transformation Radio broadcast. I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elam Counselling Services. My number is 613-699-1677. And my website is Elam, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. And Melissa, unfortunately, we have come to the end of today's show. Time has gone by so quickly.
As always, it was great to be back, Michael.
Okay, it was a pleasure discussing this show with you and talking about the story of Ruth. And yeah, I just feel in my spirit that God is going to use this show to touch someone who is experiencing broken dream today. Until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart, praying that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart. Take care, and God bless you.